Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again, and I wanted to share some of my initial impressions with a brand new indie game called Sea of Stars, which came out a day or two ago. Now for context, I'd heard absolutely nothing about this game until a couple of weeks ago when a member of my community named Traxim pointed it out to me. And it wasn't until I think the day before this game came out that I saw a bunch of gameplay for it, and to tell you guys the truth, I didn't need to see more than 15 seconds worth of footage of this game to be absolutely sold on this one, which led me to snagging it almost immediately to do a pretty impromptu stream of it last night. So I played it for about 3 to 4 hours, and I have to tell you guys that I am absolutely in love with this game. It really does tick all my boxes for a game that I'm bound to really enjoy. A beautiful 16-bit pixel aesthetic? Check. A love letter to classic turn-based RPGs? Check. Sea of Stars pays homage to some of the most beloved role-playing games of the 90s, including iconic titles from the Final Fantasy series, and more specifically Chrono Trigger, the latter of which I am ashamed to say I've never actually played, but have seen a lot of gameplay of over the years to where I can understand exactly how Sea of Stars derives inspiration from it, namely the visual design of its characters and levels. But if you ask me personally what Sea of Stars reminds me of the most, it's a mishmash of 3 old school games that I hold near and dear to my heart, which are The Legend of Dragoon, Sword of Mana, and Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. It's a game with the soft and vibrant color palette of Sword of Mana, with the interactive combat of Legend of Dragoon and Mario & Luigi, where even though those 2 games are turn-based, they still allow the player to take part in the action themselves through timing button presses to the attacks of their party members to unleash more powerful combos and higher damage values. Sea of Stars brings this back in its combat, which is undoubtedly the most fun part of the game so far. In this game, you control a party of 3 characters, each with their own distinct abilities besides a basic attack command, which they all share, and you get to time button presses in a variety of unique ways to every single type of attack that these characters will use on their foes. For example, the character Volaire will throw a boomerang that the player will have to keep tapping the attack button to continuously deflect around to the various enemies on the field, whereas Zale will conjure a fireball that the player will need to hold the attack button just the right amount in order to increase its size and optimize its damage. And of course, the player can also time their button presses to the basic attack animations of their characters in order to unleash a double strike that deals bonus damage, as well as time the presses just before an enemy projectile lands in order to block against it and mitigate some of the incoming damage. You can even make multiple characters synergize for powerful combo attacks, of which you can unlock more as the game goes on. I have to say that all of this looks visually spectacular. I straight up think that one of my favorite parts of this game so far has been getting to see all the beautiful sprite animations embedded here, of which there are so many. Every little movement made by each character is given a unique animation, and besides the ones for the default run and attack cycles, I don't think I ever saw an animation repeat itself. The sprite work here in this game is nothing short of amazing, and I think that the developers, Sabotage Games, truly deserve a pat on their back for the sheer detail they've put into this experience. Another thing here that is kind of on the subjective side of things, but really does jive with me personally, is the game's approach to strategy and stat management. Now, I'm someone who does appreciate a fair bit of strategy and stat management in games, but I'm not totally on board if a game goes overboard with those aspects, which I can definitely recognize other players may thoroughly enjoy. But for me, I like a nice middle ground where there are key elements of an RPG to keep track of, with stats like HP, MP, attack, and defense, without the game overwhelming me with a multitude of other stats on top of that, and a bunch of numbers to stay on top of to ensure optimal results. Sea of Stars fits into that middle ground perfectly, where it's just the right amount of strategizing. While I do have to think about what equipment to give to which character and what perks to choose when certain characters level up, I don't need to overthink it because the game keeps its stats pretty simple for the most part, and doesn't have me scratching my head for too long. So I ultimately like that the game rewards a nice balance of strategic and mechanical skill where stats are important, but so is your ability to time button presses during fights. It is great stuff, honestly, and just clicks with me really well. And everything here is just so seamless, and I'm not just talking about the performance here, which even that is amazing considering that I'm playing through this game on my Switch right now, since I've always loved experiencing these traditional 16-bit RPGs on a handheld, but I'm also talking about how everything transpires within the same screen in this game, with the exception of the cinematics, of course. The coolest part of this game to me is how you can see the enemies you're about to face out in the world you're exploring, and then when you challenge them for a turn-based combat scenario, you'll remain in the same area while battling them as opposed to going into an entirely separate and generic battle screen for the level. But what really impressed me here was how during certain moves where the characters had to shuffle around on screen, there were never any janky moments or visual glitches. They moved to areas that they could realistically stand on, which I found to be very impressive considering that the developers would have had to ensure that regardless of where a battle happens in this game, the characters must use the space around them appropriately without any immersion-breaking hiccups. And these spaces, or just the levels as a whole, are jaw-droppingly gorgeous, which is a verdict you'd be sure to come to if you're a fellow fan of 16-bit pixel art. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the most beautiful looking game I have ever played from this aesthetic, as not only do the character sprites look amazing as we established earlier, but so do the environments. I just love the bright and invigorating colors present in each area of this game, and the 2.5D perspective adds so much depth to the overall experience, allowing you to get a sense of scale in this already gorgeous world. And the icing on the cake here was most certainly the design of the world map, which to me was a wonderful throwback to the sequel of Chrono Trigger, that being Chrono Cross, which I have played and is a game that I adore. Not only do I like it aesthetically with how you can see all these bright, beautiful landmarks you can visit with this vast bird's eye view, but I do appreciate the assortment of optional locations as well, such as the fishing pond where there's a really fun and therapeutic fishing minigame, which I should add contributes to the cooking mechanic in this game, which I really appreciate being incorporated, as well as pretty much anywhere on the world map where you can set up a small Chrono Trigger-esque camp level where you can rest up, cook, and make hard saves. That's right, even down to the way you save in this game with these checkpoints that are in the shape of a magical spell book are reminiscent of the old school RPGs we all know and love. Now, the level traversal feels great in this game too, as you'll walk through vastly different environments while solving relatively simple puzzles, unlocking shortcuts, and exploring multiple branching paths, all while using some really fun and engaging mechanics like parkouring and being able to dynamically alter the time of day to progress through certain areas and more. All of it feels intuitive, and I don't think there was any particular section where I felt lost or confused, or as though the game was unfairly working against me in some way. I'll also touch on the music, which is very pleasant to listen to as it recaptures a lot of the funky chiptune styles of traditional RPGs. I can't say that any one particular track has stood out to me so far, and I'm not madly in love with the soundtrack here, but it is very well done, and it's just really pure and wholesome at the end of the day. And I'm looking forward to hearing more themes as I play. I'm honestly loving just about everything that's being presented in this game so far, you guys. Now, my only real quip with it would be in regards to some of its writing. Well, the story as a whole is pretty decent, and I get what they're going for with how they're trying to emulate the simple yet empowering plots of old school RPGs of having to save the world from a great evil. I do think that the characters are a bit of a letdown. Don't get me wrong, their presentation is very charming, and I love how bubbly a lot of them are, particularly through their character portraits during dialogue that alter expressions to reflect their mood, which reminded me a lot of Dragon Ball Z Boo's Fury, which is one of my favorite games. But beyond that, they seem very one-note and uninteresting. The game never really establishes any arcs, quirks, or flaws for the characters presented here, which is especially true of the two main leads, Zale and Valere, who are the archetypal chosen ones known as Celestial Warriors, who've been tasked with honing their respective powers of the Sun and Moon to put an end to the evil Fleshmancer once and for all and save the world. It's cool that you get to choose which of these two characters you want to play as at the start, which once again reminded me of Sword of Mana, and I chose Zale because he imprinted on me right away out the front gate since, fun fact, I'm actually named after the god of the sun, and Zale's a fellow, you know, Indian-looking lad who's in control of the sun. But unlike Sword of Mana, the two characters are sadly underdeveloped, and my excitement for resonating with these characters quickly died out since, in this game, their reputation clearly precedes them, as their godlike powers are always the focus of the game during both gameplay and story moments, but their unique personalities and any compelling characteristics they may have definitely aren't. At least so far. Memorable characters are one of the things I love most about RPGs, so if these two characters don't become more interesting during the rest of my playthrough, then that would be kind of a bummer. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, the beautiful aesthetics and insanely addictive gameplay are more than carrying this package here and are making for one of the most enjoyable and all-around adorable RPGs that I have ever played. The 3 to 4 hours I spent last night playing this game slipped by very quickly since it was so easy for me to get immersed in this game simply through its visual style alone. and I cannot wait to continue playing it. If I had to give this game a score right now based on my initial impressions, I would more than likely give it a solid 8. The story and characters again don't particularly stand out, which is why this isn't a little higher, but if my perspective does change up by the end of the playthrough, I will definitely keep you all posted in a follow-up review. But until then guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to catch my full playthrough of Sea of Stars, then be sure to follow me over on twitch.tv/irritableindian. I'd love to say hello to you guys there. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay positive, and as always, keep on keeping on.